There is something about California in the 1980s that captures a very specific moment in American history. The neon colors, the exploding tech industry, the excess and the optimism. And if someone lived through it, they know exactly what made that decade so electric. This was a time when California was cementing its position as the center of American innovation and culture. Silicon Valley was transforming from a promising idea into an economic powerhouse. Hollywood was producing the biggest blockbusters ever made. MTV was beaming California's image to the world, and the California lifestyle became something everyone wanted to emulate. This was the decade that gave us the personal computer revolution, Valley Girl culture, hair metal bands on the Sunset Strip, and an economy that seemed unstoppable. The laid-back 1970s vibe was giving way to something faster, flashier, more ambitious. Living in California meant being at the epicenter of where America was heading next. Let's walk through what daily life actually felt like during that unforgettable decade. Some of this might bring back memories. Some of it might explain why the 1980s in California felt like living in the future. Let's step into that world. Homes in California in the 1980s looked distinctly different from the earthy tones of the previous decade. Out went the browns and oranges. In came pastel colors, dusty rose, mauve, seafoam green, and peach-dominated living rooms and bedrooms. Vertical blinds replaced curtains, giving homes that sleek, modern look. Brass and glass were everywhere. Glass coffee tables with brass frames, brass lamps, brass doorknobs, everything shiny and reflective. Track lighting became standard in California homes, with multiple lights on ceiling tracks that could be adjusted to spotlight different areas. This was considered sophisticated and modern. The kitchen became a showcase. White or almond-colored appliances replaced the harvest gold of the 1970s. Countertops were often pale laminate with geometric patterns. Open floor plans were becoming popular, especially in newer developments. The entertainment center was the focal point of the living room. These massive particle board units housed the television, the VCR, the stereo system, and collections of VHS tapes. The television had grown larger. A 27-inch screen was impressive. Remote controls were standard now, though they were chunky with dozens of buttons. Cable television transformed what Californians could watch. MTV launched in 1981, and it became essential viewing. Seeing music videos all day felt revolutionary. California bands dominated the channel. Van Halen, Motley Crue, and Quiet Riot brought Los Angeles metal to living rooms across America. The VCR changed everything. Video rental stores appeared in every neighborhood. Blockbuster Video opened its first California location in 1986. Friday nights meant going to the video store to rent movies. The new releases wall was where everyone headed first. The answering machine became common in California homes by the mid-1980s. Coming home to a blinking red light meant messages waiting. The outgoing message people recorded became a form of self-expression. Cordless phones arrived and felt like science fiction. Walking around the house while talking on the phone was freedom. The range was limited and reception often crackled, but it felt like the future. Homes in Southern California still embraced indoor-outdoor living, but with 1980s aesthetics. Patio furniture was white or pastel. Hot tubs became status symbols. Deck parties with wine coolers and California cuisine were common. Northern California homes had their own character. The Bay Area was more expensive and more eclectic. Victorian houses in San Francisco were being renovated. The peninsula was filling with tech workers buying their first homes with stock options. The car culture that defined California reached new heights in the 1980s. The freeways were getting more crowded, but Southern Californians still built their entire lives around driving. The cars of the 1980s were smaller than the land yachts of the 1970s. The fuel crisis had changed American automotive design. Japanese cars were everywhere in California. Honda Accord, Toyota Camry, and Nissan Sentra. These reliable, fuel-efficient cars made sense for California commutes, and they became part of everyday life. But California also loved sports cars and luxury vehicles. The BMW 3 Series became the aspirational car for young professionals. Seeing a BMW in the parking lot meant someone was doing well. The Mercedes-Benz was the ultimate status symbol in Los Angeles. Convertibles were perfect for California weather. The Mazda Miata launched in 1989 and became instantly popular. The Ford Mustang remained a California icon. Customization was huge. Lowriders in East Los Angeles were art on wheels. Hydraulics made cars bounce. There were elaborate paint jobs and chrome everywhere. Surf culture meant pickup trucks and vans with surfboard racks. The Volkswagen Vanagon became the vehicle of choice for beach trips and road trips up the coast. Traffic was getting worse, but it had not yet reached the nightmare levels it would in later decades. The 405 freeway was crowded, but you could still move. Driving from Los Angeles to San Diego on a Friday afternoon was still doable. Car phones appeared in the mid-1980s. These were actual telephones mounted in cars, not cellular phones. Having a car phone meant you were important and successful. The phones were expensive and calls cost dollars per minute. By the late 1980s, the first bulky cellular phones appeared. The Motorola Dynatac was the size of a brick and cost thousands of dollars, but it represented the cutting edge. Driving culture included cruising. Van Nuys Boulevard, Hollywood Boulevard, and countless other strips were where teenagers and young adults would cruise on weekend nights. Cars moved slowly, music blasted, and people watched and were watched. California's car culture was also defined by its car washes. Full-service car washes had attendants who vacuumed, wiped, and detailed. Waiting in the lounge while your car got cleaned was a regular Saturday activity. Before we continue with the technology boom and cultural explosion that defined California in this era, if you are enjoying this look back at how people really lived and want to explore more decades and places, consider subscribing. There are so many more stories about how Americans built the life we know today. Silicon Valley in the 1980s was where the future was being built. The personal computer revolution that started in garages in the 1970s became an industry in the 1980s. Apple was the California success story everyone knew. The Apple II was in schools across California. The Macintosh launched in 1984 with its famous Super Bowl commercial directed by Ridley Scott. The Mac, with its graphical interface and mouse, made computing accessible. Steve Jobs was becoming a celebrity, not just in tech circles, but in popular culture. Intel continued developing faster processors. Each generation of chips meant computers could do more. Oracle was founded in Santa Clara and became a database giant. Sun Microsystems started in 1982 and became essential to the tech infrastructure. Working in tech was becoming aspirational. Engineers and programmers were buying homes, driving nice cars, and changing the world. Stock options meant secretaries and early employees were becoming millionaires when companies went public. The culture of Silicon Valley was forming. Long hours, intense work, massive ambition, and the belief that technology would solve everything. Venture capital was pouring into the valley. Sand Hill Road in Menlo Park became the center of tech financing. Video games remained huge. Atari was based in Sunnyvale. Arcades were packed with teenagers pumping quarters into Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, and later Street Fighter. The Nintendo Entertainment System launched in the United States in 1986 and became the must-have gift. Kids across California begged their parents for a Nintendo. Super Mario Bros. Was revolutionary. The aerospace industry continued employing tens of thousands in Southern California. Lockheed, Hughes Aircraft, and Rockwell. Defense. Spending under President Reagan meant these companies were thriving. These were solid middle-class jobs that drew people to California. Hollywood in the 1980s was producing blockbuster after blockbuster. The movie industry was bigger than ever. Steven Spielberg and George Lucas were creating films that broke all records. E.T. in 1982 became a cultural phenomenon. Return of the Jedi in 1983 concluded the original Star Wars trilogy. Indiana Jones films thrilled audiences. Top Gun in 1986 made Tom Cruise a superstar and showcased San Diego. Back to the Future captured the spirit of the 1980s perfectly. The Terminator made Arnold Schwarzenegger an action hero. Working in the industry or knowing someone who did was common in Los Angeles. The studios employed thousands. television production remained centered in Los Angeles. Sitcoms like Cheers, The Cosby Show, and Family Ties dominated ratings. Hour-long dramas like Hill Street Blues and LA Law showcased grittier storytelling. Music videos created a new industry. Directors, production companies, and crews in Los Angeles were creating many movies for MTV. The music coming out of California defined much of the decade. The Sunset Strip in Los Angeles was the center of the rock universe. Clubs like the Whiskey A Go-Go, the Roxy, and the Troubadour showcased bands every night. Hair metal dominated. Motley Crue, Rat, Poison, and dozens of other bands had big hair, spandex, and loud guitar solos. Getting discovered on the Sunset Strip was the dream. The Red Hot Chili Peppers formed in Los Angeles in 1983, bringing a California funk rock sound. Guns N' Roses exploded onto the scene in 1987 with Appetite for Destruction, bringing danger and authenticity back to rock. Punk rock thrived in Southern California. Black Flag, Bad Religion, and the Descendants created the hardcore punk scene. Shows in small venues, aggressive music, and do-it-yourself ethics defined that scene. Hip-hop was emerging in California. Ice-T was pioneering West Coast rap. NWA would form in Compton in 1986 and change music forever, though their biggest impact came at the end of the decade. Mall culture was at its absolute peak in 1980s California. Malls were not just shopping destinations, they were social centers. The Galleria in Sherman Oaks became famous after the film Valley Girl showcased mall culture. Teenagers spent entire days at the mall, walking around, hanging out in the food court, maybe buying something. South Coast Plaza in Orange County was massive and upscale. Del Amo Fashion Center in Torrance drew big crowds. Horton Plaza in San Diego stood out for its postmodern architecture. These malls employed thousands and drew shoppers from across the region. Department stores anchored the malls, names like Macy's, Nordstrom, and Robinsons May. These stores had multiple floors and sold everything from clothing to furniture. The Gap expanded rapidly through California malls. Esprit, with its bright colors and distinctive style, felt quintessentially Californian. Casual Corner, The Limited, and Benetton became familiar names, sometimes courting controversy with their advertising. Music stores like Tower Records and The Warehouse sold cassette tapes and CDs, and browsing through music could occupy teenagers for hours. B. Dalton Bookseller and Walden Books provided books before big box bookstores arrived. The food court revolutionized mall dining, with multiple fast food counters surrounding shared seating. Chains like Hot Dog on a Stick, with employees in colorful striped uniforms, Sbarro, Panda Express bringing Chinese-American food to malls, and Orange Julius for drinks became part of the mall routine. Food culture in California during the 1980s was diverse and innovative. California cuisine became a recognized style. Chefs like Wolfgang Puck were creating sophisticated dishes using fresh local ingredients. Spago opened in West Hollywood in 1982, and it became the celebrity restaurant where seeing movie stars dining was part of the experience. The farm-to-table movement that started in the 1970s continued growing. Farmers markets became more popular, and the Santa Monica Farmers Market attracted chefs and home cooks. Health consciousness was bigger in California than anywhere else. Juice bars, smoothie shops, and salad restaurants proliferated. The Cheesecake Factory started in Beverly Hills in 1978 and expanded through the 1980s with enormous portions and huge menus. Casual dining chains exploded. Chili's opened California locations, and TGI Fridays brought flair bartenders. California Pizza Kitchen started in Beverly Hills in 1985, putting unusual toppings on pizzas. Mexican food remained essential to California life. Taco Bell was everywhere, and so were authentic taquerias. The burrito was California comfort food. In-N-Out Burger continued expanding across Southern California. The secret menu became part of California culture. Asking for animal-style fries meant you were in the know. Sushi became mainstream in California during the 1980s. Japanese restaurants opened across the state, and California rolls made sushi accessible to Americans who were nervous about raw fish. Wine country in Napa and Sonoma continued growing in prestige. California wines were winning international competitions, and wine tasting tours became popular weekend trips. The fitness craze hit California harder than anywhere else. Aerobics classes were everywhere, and people flocked to them for energy and community. Aerobics exploded into pop culture. Jane Fonda workout videos sold millions. Women in leotards, leg warmers, and headbands did high-impact aerobics to pop music. Gold's Gym in Venice Beach remained the bodybuilding mecca. Arnold Schwarzenegger had trained there in the 1970s and stayed connected. Muscle Beach attracted bodybuilders and tourists. Running and jogging became mainstream. The Los Angeles Marathon started in 1986, drawing thousands of runners through the streets of the city. Running shoes became fashion statements. Nike, with its swoosh logo, dominated. Reebok made aerobic shoes, and New Balance appealed to serious runners. Skateboarding continued evolving, with vert ramps and street skating both thriving. Tony Hawk was rising through the ranks. Skateboard culture brought distinctive fashion and attitude. The beach scene stayed central to coastal identity, but it evolved. Volleyball on the sand was huge. Manhattan Beach, Hermosa Beach, and Huntington Beach had permanent nets, and beach volleyball was becoming a serious sport. Rollerblading appeared in the mid-1980s. Suddenly, inline skates were everywhere, and the beach paths filled with rollerbladers. Mountain biking was born in Marin County in the late 1970s and exploded in the 1980s. Riding bikes on mountain trails became a California passion. Life in the 1980s in California was not perfect. Housing costs were rising dramatically. The affordable California was disappearing. What cost $100,000 in 1980 might cost 3 times that by 1989. Families were being priced out. The crack epidemic devastated communities, particularly in Los Angeles. South Central and Compton faced violence and destruction, the evening news broadcast. The AIDS crisis hit San Francisco especially hard. The Castro district lost an entire generation to a disease that was poorly understood and often ignored. Fear and grief pervaded the community. The 1980s saw increased gang violence in Los Angeles. The Bloods and the Crips, with colors meaning life or death, carried out drive-by shootings that made neighborhoods terrifying. Pollution remained a serious problem. Smog in Los Angeles was thick on many days. Air quality alerts were common. Children were kept inside during bad air days. But what defined California in the 1980s was ambition and innovation. This was the state where the future was being invented faster than anywhere else. Technology was changing the world from Silicon Valley. Entertainment was creating global culture from Hollywood. The economy was booming and opportunities seemed endless. For those who lived in California during the 1980s, it was a time of bright colors, loud music, and boundless optimism. The traffic was getting worse and housing was getting expensive, but California still felt like the place where dreams came true. For those with memories of this remarkable era in the Golden State, there is always more history to explore.